Shenequa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It is so great to have you. Uh, if I'm so curious, there's so much. You've written this fabulous book, A Black Girl in the Middle, essays on allegedly figuring it all out. There's so much I want to ask you, and we'll have a little bit of time, so I'll get a chance to ask some of it. But I wonder, had you been named Adrian, how different would your life have been, right? Because that was that the name that you talk about in the first chapter, that Shenequa was kind of a lark. That was not what was banked on. And all of a sudden, that was later, your mom sort of switched decisions on the name. And this has been kind of a thing. So, I mean, imagine you had gone through life as Adrian. What do you think it would have been like?
That is such an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking that. I don't know if my aggressions would have been micro as opposed to macro if my name were Adrian. Because there are Black girls named Adrian, white girls, there are men named Adrian. So, the aggressions that I would have received would have been macro, and they would have been based more on the other person's projections of a Black girl from Queens, depending on what my hair looked at the time. Maybe I had my locks, maybe I didn't. But upon me being named Shenequa, before I entered the room, they decided who I was. And contending with that is a challenge.
Yeah, you say in the book that it's not that your name doesn't bother you, but it's the fact that so many people prejudge you before meeting you because of your name. That's I mean, there's so much in a name, right? Names are such powerful things, right, that we don't get to choose. And this is a thing that, and yours has been sort of like, I mean, I almost want to say supporting cast member, but it seems bigger than that. That it's something that seems to loom, I don't know if large, but present throughout a lot of your story.
Throughout the first chapter, or throughout
just who you are. I mean, I feel like I know you a little bit, even though we don't know each other, because your writing style is so descriptive. It's not a memoir per se; it's a book of essays, but but there's a lot of you in it, and I came away feeling like I know you. So that's why I say that it seems the name looms large.
It does loom large over my life. But I've also been very judicious about who I allow into my life. So I don't really believe in astrology, but there's something just pulled up on my Instagram, and I'm a Gemini. And they said Geminis don't go into people's lives. People go into Gemini's lives. And I was like, correct. I don't go into people's lives. I keep to myself. Introvert, might get into that later. So if you are in my life, I have done enough emotional research on you for you to hopefully understand that my name is my name. It's not something I'm ashamed of, but you'll see that I am one of many Shenequas, and we can exist on this beautiful spectrum of color and life and flaws and all that jazz.
You have your email signature is from James Baldwin. You want to write a sentence as clean as a bone. And I found myself picking out some of those sentences because some of these sentences that you've written are on there. I wish I would have written these sentences, but
thank you.
You say this in that when you're talking about your name, you have a nickname, Chin Chin, and you say Chin Chin is tattooed to your identity. And I thought, man, you could sit before that sentence is so simple. Right. It's not complex, but these are the hard things, right? To write simple sentences, to write these sentences that are clean as a bone. And the book is littered with them, where I found myself stopping and saying, wow, these are the bones. It's like a boneyard. The book is kind of like a boneyard.
How would you like me to expound upon that?
I don't know that I would, unless you want to. Unless you want to. I don't know. I don't know.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
So when you write about your name, and there's this weird interaction you have with a barista in the opening chapter who says
Yeah.
to you basically, "You're not that kind of black girl." Like,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
was a person of color.
Yes, it was a person of color. So, for those who have not read the book, chapter 1 is what, Scott is referring to. I went to a Starbucks, hopefully well, they're going through a lot right now, so hopefully they won't say anything, and I ordered one of my drinks, and, when you go to these, coffee chains, they always ask you what your name is, so I said, "Oh, my name is" I spelled my name out, Shenequa, and the barista, person of color, sounds it out and was like, "Oh, Shaniqua?" And I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, you don't look like a Shaniqua. You look like more of an Abby." And I remember just thinking, it felt so it was dismissive. It was very indicative of what that person deemed a Shaniqua to be. And it then showcased that that person thinks that I, based upon whatever energy I was giving them, that I should have a name closer to whiteness, that Shaniqua was too far left from what they thought I should be and look like. And I was just like, wow, WOW. Wow. So it was a lot.
You say something at the end of that chapter, which I stopped. I had an emotional response to this, and I don't know if that's the intent. But you say the last sentence of the first chapter is, "My name is Shaniqua, and it's a pleasure to meet you."
Yeah.
There are certain things you can do with simple sentences, right? But that set the tone for me as the reader, that even though this was a book of essays and not a memoir per se, that I was invited into the exposition, right? That I was not. I mean, was that the intent? Was that the intent? The introduction feel, because it was intimate. I mean, it feels intimate for. I think as a reader, it felt intimate.
Um, the reason why I ended the chapter like that, hi, my name is Shaniqua, and it's a pleasure to meet you. It's because, well, first off, you spent your money on this book. Thank you. You didn't have to. Secondly, it is a pleasure to meet you. And that line at the very end of the chapter, and you have already experienced a good chunk of my existence. And I hope that now you feel more inclined to want to sit down and continue the book and continue to get to know me and continue to uh, dance with me, if you will. And also, I opened the book with that chapter because I'm not the only Shaniqua in the world, and this is who I am. And whichever Shaniqua you meet, she might be just like me. She might be the exact opposite of me. I know a Shaniqua who graduated from Harvard. I know a Shaniqua who lives in the Bronx. You know what I mean? Like, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I hope that you take that pleasure and you use it as a light to navigate through the rest of the book.
You speak in the next chapter about friendship and just how significant it is in life, and when you I always mark adolescence as that time where peers, not family, become the center of your life, right? And
Yes,
in some way, right? That you
correct.
And then it gets more intense. You go to college, if you go to college, because then you get to your ideas start to define identity a little bit, and you can shuffle that up and all these sorts of things. But you write about this friendship with Kimberly
Yeah.
after talking about just how important friendships are and how in late modernity they are sustenance, right? And this friendship just goes toxic. I mean, it's she's very judgy. You wind up I no, tell me if I have this right. You wind up in a sort of flirtatious situationship or something with her boyfriend's roommate or something. Some boyfriend's roommate. I have that right, right?
Mhm.
And she thought this was kindred to an ultimate act of betrayal, and just
Correct.
couldn't. And then you say something about her, how she's spending her 30th birthday, and she has this dramatic text about purging the old and going into a new. I mean, it's very Shakespearean or something. And you're like, well, I guess I'm part of the casting away.
Mhm.
So I'm reading this and I'm thinking, I wonder if Kimberly will read this because she would
Oh,
know who she is. I mean, she would
she
obviously because
absolutely
you were
would know.
two close friends for years.
You would absolutely know who she is, and I hope this doesn't come across bitter, but, like, I don't give a damn how she feels. I just don't. That's number 1. Number 2, just to, for people.
That doesn't sound bitter, by the way, at
No,
all.
I just don't care about how she feels. But, so just to, um to get people to understand, chapter 2, entitled Kimberly, is about a relationship that I had with a girl that she and I were very close friends from, like, high school all the way through college, and Kimberly dated a guy. Let's just say Kimberly dated Scott. Kimberly and Scott broke up. I then
I've
proceeded.
never dated a Kimberly in my life. I'm sure I've been rejected by Kimberly. I've been rejected by almost every name and every race of woman. I've been. I mean, it's my. That's why I feel like, for as far as diversity goes, I've been rejected. I'm an equal opportunity reject in that regard.
That's horrible. And, so Kimberly and Scott date, Kimberly and Scott break up. Me, Shaniqua, I date Scott's roommate, Joshua. And Kimberly is pissed that I am dating Joshua. She accuses me of lacking absolute loyalty. And then for her 30th birthday, I text her to see, like, hey, what are the plans? What's going on? And she said, I'm entering into my 30s peaceful and burden free. That's just the concise version of the chapter. How, and I guess, what's your question again?
I mean, I'm just imagining. Do you think she'll read this? I know you don't
Do I
care,
think she
but I
that's a
mean,
great question. Do I think she will
because
read it?
you're a I mean, you're becoming public. You've written an essay in the light of the George Floyd murder that Jeff Bezos retweeted. So I mean, you're a person of some notoriety, at least in a sort of intellectual cosmopolitan sphere, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
people. I, it's not crazy that she could
It's
read
not
this.
crazy that you're correct. It's not crazy that she could read it. I don't know. She and I have not spoken in well over 10 years, and I don't have any interest to see what she's doing, how she's feeling, what she's up to.
If you saw her at a
Mhm.
party, right, or some social context, right, some event in New York, and you happen to cross paths, which is not, I mean, it's a big city, but it's not inconceivable that it would happen.
Right. Correct.
How do you think that would go? What would you say? Would you avoid her, or would you talk to her?
No,
You would avoid her.
not avoid her, but I just don't.
Just wouldn't.
That was, it's not about drama. That was so many years ago, but character is character. And something that I firmly believe is people never forget to be who they are. So that's you, I'm me. And that's that.
You also say that friends carry us into the third decade of our lives
Mhm.
powerfully, and you say that this is especially true. It's true in general, I think. Although it's interesting, I think that's probably not true for most of human history, right? Because you live and die with a small tribe, right? You don't pick friends. But
Yeah.
we live in a weird time in late modernity and late stage capitalism for the last couple hundred years, especially the past century, where you move around, you're able to, and the thing that you have are your friends. But you say, despite this is sort of a ubiquitous reality for people in urban area, well, people in general, that it's especially important for Black women. Can you say why?
Um, the world leans on Black women in a way that if we were to lean on the world, it would crumble. And because the world leans on us and expects so much from us, we need someone to have our backs, and oftentimes the only people to have our backs are other Black women because they understand the plight, the struggle, and just the very unique experiences that we as Black women go through. And friendship is so powerful. It is cleansing. It is a way for you to, um I guess, hide the vulnerabilities you might have from the world, while your girls can see them and heal them and nurture them. So I am always a proponent for friendships within Black women, within Black circles. And I'm currently reading a book, and the book that I'm reading, it's about three friends who find each other later in life. Something that you hear a lot of when it comes to friendships. So me and my girl, we knew each other from high school. We've been best friends since the fifth grade. And it's just like, that's cute. But like, I'm not who I was in the fifth grade. I'm not who I was in high school. I'm not who I was last week. So I really, really gravitate to women who you can find later in life, who, you've ironed out some of the wrinkles of your own flaws and personalities, and you're kind of like, this is me, this is where I'm at, this is who I operate with. And to be able to find that tribe is so important, regardless of where you are in your journey, but especially later on in life. And I think that you cannot fully bloom as an individual, especially a Black woman, without friendship. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, no, you did quite well. And I love that you talk about this book you're reading about finding people late in life, because I've been someone who's made good at adult friendships
Good.
every decade. And this podcast has been, I mean, I've done about 1,000 or so podcasts since I've been, and this is like 270 some for this particular show. But because it's a long form conversational show, sometimes I become close with some of the guests. Like, I become fans of their work. They follow the podcast. We wind up, becoming friends. It's this podcast itself has been, I mean, a couple guests ago, I was watching Gladiator 2, and I texted a guest who's one of the top ancient historians in the country. So UC San Diego. I said, "Do you want to talk about this movie? I have all these questions. Is this for real? I don't know anything about, third century Rome. I just, we have gaps." But yeah, I love that picture you have of a sort of openness to acquiring new connections. I mean, that's because I think not a lot of people. Some people might be there by necessity, but that's interesting to hear that you welcome it.
I do welcome it, but I welcome it with the boundaries that I now have. And that was not something that I had prior. And I think I'm not an anomaly in that. I think a lot of us now are understanding the power of boundaries and how they help you show up better in relationships. And that is something that I am really thankful for.
All right, here from that chapter is another bone-worthy sentence. This thing is, I mean, you could suck the marrow out of the sentence. There's no emotional cemetery for dead friendships. I probably read that sentence 5 times, because you talk about not dealing with death a lot. I dealt with death a lot. My grandfather was a funeral director and stuff, and a lot of people in my family died. But you say I didn't have the people that died, you weren't incredibly close to, but at least you could go to their graves. At least you could have these fantasy conversations. At least you could do that. There's something about the closure that marks a transition. But you're like, for these dead friendships, there's nothing like that. And that, I think that sentence where you point out this thing that does not exist is something I think that so many people experience existentially, but don't have a frame for. They don't have words for. So, I mean, those are beautiful words. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. It's the truth, because when Kimberly and when our relationship came to an end, and there's a lot more that happened with that relationship that I did not go into, because it would be an introduction of a whole new set of characters. But when that relationship came to an end, there was really nowhere for me to go to mourn, or there was nowhere for me to go and even like express the spectrum of emotions that I was feeling at the time. And that sentence, I didn't give much thought to it, but it really was something that I wish I had then. Like, where do you go when a friendship is over? Who do you speak to? And like, it's challenging, because if you go
and nobody comes up to you, right, and says, sorry for your loss.
Yes,
Most
yes.
people don't even know you had a loss.
No one says it. No one says, "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, Scott." No one's. Do you hear that police officer back there?
It's all right. You're in New York. I just assume that's, every day. I mean, I'm in Philadelphia, so it's not. I mean, it's pretty ubiquitous. But I'm in a basement, so it's not.
So, no one says to you, "I'm so sorry for your loss," because a lot of people only associate loss with like death, and there's no timetable or time limit when it comes to losing a loved one, parent, child, spouse. I get it. But when it comes to friendships, no one says that to you. And also we don't, we're not saying, oh yeah, me and my best friend just broke up. Like that's not the same. Like if you were to say, oh, me and my fiance called off the wedding, or me and my husband are getting divorced, you understand that. But no one says, oh, me and my best friend, we stopped talking, we just had a falling out. There's a bit more conversation about that happening now, but that does not happen or did not happen then. And I don't even know if I would have known how to accept that olive branch had it been given to me at the time.
Yeah, I mean that. I think we don't talk enough about how you navigate friendships. It's very interesting. I read a book years ago by an Episcopal bishop, and he very liberal, progressive bishop from New Jersey, and he was saying that they need a divorce liturgy because what happens is for the wedding, everybody's there with you, and it's a big emotional time, and and he said, but when the thing ends, there's no ceremony. There's no you get a letter from the court at 3:06 p.m. at Nassau County or whatever. This marriage was terminated. And he said, what if you actually got together and tearfully and in a church or a synagogue or something that you did mourn this, and you awkwardly went down and had wine and cheese and then went your separate ways. I mean, at least it would give you a capacity, right, to mark it. And this is, I mean, friendship is just so complex, right? Because I don't know how many of our listeners, how many folks listening to this right now have their own certainly emotional graveyards where friendships lie, and they wish they had them. Rather, there's no graveyard for it, but they wish they had something where they could bury and visit and these sorts of things.
And when Kimberly and I came to an end, I thought I was a bad friend. I thought that, oh wow, no, Shenequa, you just don't know how to be a good friend. Like you don't know how to show up for people, or you don't know how to be there for your friends. Like I carried that with me for years, this belief that I was just inherently a bad friend.
How many years?
8.
Wow.
8 to 10 years. And it was only recently when I was writing that book, in that chapter, and I was telling mommy the story of my mom. Shout out to my mom, y'all, because I call her mommy, like everyone knows who she is. And I was just like, mommy, can you imagine this? And she said, she called you a burden because you dated the roommate. So were you not a burden when you listened to everything else that she wanted you to do? And then it clicked. That she was not looking for loyalty. It felt like worship to a certain degree. It felt like obedience to a certain degree. Like, are you serious? Your ex-boyfriend's roommate. And not to mention at the time, for listeners, she had moved on and was dating someone else.
Look, Kimberly has issues, or I know that's not her name, but this is she would not be a potential friend for me. So I had this experience. Gosh, I guess a month ago or so. I was gonna switch over to T-Mobile and all this stuff, and I was gonna have to change my number. And this was just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I've changed my number like once or twice in my adult life. I wasn't ready for that level of identity change or commitment. Wound up with a new phone, wound up the different plan, all this stuff. Spent more money than I wanted to. Got a decent deal. You have this awful, awful story. And I mean, well written, but hard. I mean, this guy redacted. I mean, it's like, I loved reading it. I mean, but it's terrible in the sense of I felt terrible for you. But this guy who was able to. He was this smooth guy and was able to talk to you about Civil War scholars and Eddie Glaw. By the way, I know Eddie, very nice guy, and he goes toxic on you. I mean, it's really, really. He struggled with addiction, and addiction is brutal. And you were on the backside of addiction backlash, or something. You assumed that there just was not a capacity for healthy relationships, so you kind of had to make a boundaried assertion, and you were at the point where you had to change your number.
Mm-hmm.
And no, I didn't even know you could do this. So you stayed with your carrier, you kept your phone. I'm like, wait, you can do that? You call? I mean, now I'm curious, when you're telling the person, let's call her Barbara, the person, although she probably wasn't actually from the United States, so Barbara probably was, the way that stuff is outsourced, but so Barbara might not be a very typical name for someone where she's handling calls from. But you tell her, look, I'm emotionally distraught. What does she say? I mean, does she offer any consolation to you? Because that's a pretty vulnerable thing to say to someone you'll never talk to again. I've got to change my number because I'm being stalked and traumatized.
I think the person. I think it was over the phone too, and they said, "I'm very sorry to hear that." It walked the line between professionalism and like true empathy, and because of that, they waived whatever fee it would have cost for me to change my phone number. And
could you have said, you don't know how bad it is? Can I get an upgrade?
Oh, right.
I mean, all you're giving me is the fee waived. I mean, this is real trauma.
I absolutely not. I did not want to part ways with my phone number. I just actually was, I came back from a trip to Jamaica. I went on vacation, came back, did my laundry, put my summer clothes away. And I had this like little bin, because I hate the summer, by the way. It's my least favorite season. I had this little bin, and I put my bathing suits and stuff away in, and I found an old business card that I had, and it had my old number on it, 917200. I'm not gonna say the rest because a new person might have my number now. And like, I hate the fact that I had to change my number because I loved my old number. And I don't think people realize just how emotionally connected they are to their phone numbers.
Well, especially because we live, your pocket computer is your best friend, right? I mean, this is the thing you live with. It is such a part of your identity that it's traumatic. I mean, it's interesting because you talk about knowing your childhood phone numbers, right? And capacity to, I could remember my friends' numbers, but that's very different now with saving numbers and contacts and stuff. But there's something about the number, your identity. I mean, I have had a 215 number, which is sort of old school Philly. I'll die with a 215. I could be in Honolulu. I would keep my 215 number because it's old school Philly, right? I mean,
I'm always a 917 girl.
That is a quintessential New York number.
I am always a 917 girl. I will never be a 718 girl. I will never be a 646 girl.
Do you have prejudices when people with those numbers call you?
Oh my God.
Do you rank them? You rank them?
Long story short, but like, I just exchanged numbers with someone. This person has a 516 number. I said, absolutely not. Like 516 Long Island? Absolutely not, please. No, you're not real. Please get out of my face. And 516 is Long Island. It's really like, that's where they live. But like, I'm a 917 girl. I will always be a 917 girl. I do not plan to change my number again, but God forbid I have to, it will be a 917.
I think for our listeners, because they
might not have the context.
I checked the other day because somebody was asking me about listenership. They're like, I was like, yeah, I've got listeners everywhere but Antarctica. We're looking for it. We're looking for that continent. So if you're out there and you have a friend from Antarctica who likes essays, tell them, send them Shenequa Golding's book, Black Girl in the Middle. But I think a lot of our listeners might not understand when you look at a map and see Long Island and Manhattan or something, or Queen, this is an entire universe, and you might as well be in a different continent.
Yes.
right? I mean, that's right. I mean, Long Island. It's worse than being from Jersey.
No, it's not. No, no. It's
See,
not.
I would think the Lincoln Tunnel. I would think that's less of a seismic divide.
It depends on some parts of Long Island, because some parts of Long Island, they're like cute, you know.
But
They
if
have
you live in Hoboken, you're still part of the shadow of Manhattan.
yes, right.
In a way that you're not on Long Island.
Yes, correct. Very true. Very true. We love you, Long Island.
So another sentence I love. I have these notes. I have behind. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but what a clean and amazing sentence I have in my notes. You're talking about a message you received from Redacted. We'll call him. You said the body of the message was a manic display of a man coming undone and blaming me for his unraveling. I wish I could write sentences like that.
You can.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I'd have to write every day, and I'd have to. I mean, these are.
No,
I mean, that's a great sentence.
You don't have to write every day to do that. You just have to go through a lot of fire.
No, because people that go through a lot of fire cannot express it that way. I mean, there are a lot of people that have been through a lot of trauma, a lot of pain. They can't express it elegantly like that. I mean, that's elegantly expressed. Expressing something elegantly that's horrible.
Oh, well, thank you. I remember, just to give readers some even more context, I dated a guy, a brilliant guy who struggled with addiction, and then things went left, as you noted, and he got toxic on me, had to change my phone number. So when I finally had the courage to change my phone number, I thought like I freed myself, like the boogeyman can't get me anymore. I'm fine. I'm great. Only for this man to email me everything he could not text me. And the level of defeat and deflation that I experienced in that moment was bananas. So in the body of the email that he sent to me, it was him just coming undone. And I was the nearest, closest, most present person that he could blame for that. And I thankfully, again, have not had to deal with people in my life who have experience and had to deal with addiction. So I don't know how any of it works. And I want to be very clear. My ex deserved, because I don't speak to him. I don't know what he's doing with his life. He deserved help. He deserved
Maybe
care.
He's dating Kimberly.
That's horrible. Could you imagine? Horrible. My ex deserved care and help and anything and everything that he could do to rid himself of that disease. That does not mean I have to put up with the ugliness that comes from that experience.
Yeah, in that chapter, you talk about the weaponization of emotional qualities, things like forgiveness. And you say grace will be the next weaponized thing, that you have to show them grace. You have to show them grace, which kind of confounds the very essence of the word, right? It's unmerited favor, right? So when you have to show it, it's not grace, right? Because there's nothing scandalous or outrageous about it. It's just one other onerous emotional state that diminishes your soul a little bit, right?
And something else that I've noticed about the weaponization of grace is that if you are someone who has demonstrated any level of competence, or you have any kind of organization about your life, or you are perceived to have things together, the onus of extending grace to the person who commits the transgression always falls on you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's this sort of, again, it's another emotional burden on top of what you're already feeling because of the transgression. Right?
Yes.
So you're kind of adding insult to injury. So I was really struck by, you have these sort of, there's several sort of connections to guys, relationships with guys that don't work out.
Yeah.
And I think this is the one I have right. This guy kisses you, and it's very powerful. It's a little 50. I mean, I'm not trying to be too graphic, but the subtle, almost choke maneuver in the back of the, I mean, it's very intense. It's Casanova here. And you talk about all these things you wanted to know and to do and the conversations you never get to have with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm a comic book guy, and you say you want to know which X-Men is his favorite aside from Wolverine. And
Because
then
Wolverine is everyone's favorite.
yeah, it's ubiquitous, right? It's not even, By the way, I've used ubiquitous more than once in this conversation. It's done. I'm not saying it again for the rest of the life.
Enough.
Done.
Enough.
Ubiquitous has become ubiquitous. It's not funny. So you say extra points if they answer Nightcrawler or Cyclops. No, why? That's I stopped. This fascinates me. I couldn't wait to ask you this question.
My younger brother, is a huge comic book guy, and he always told me that he was so disappointed in what Marvel did with Cyclops in the movies, because in the comic book, Cyclops hand-to-hand combat is like not to be messed with, to the point where he was really on par with Logan and Nightcrawler, just because to be able to teleport in and out of time is just amazing. But that line was more so because I grew up watching X-Men. I grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons, and that's kind of like, I'm very much so a woman, but I'm also like a bit of a tomboy. So any X-Men, any DC comics, any of that, it's my bag. But if you always say, "Oh yeah, I love Wolverine, he's the best," and I'm like, okay, whatever, you don't really know anything. But my personal favorite is Beast.
Beast is great.
Beast is amazing. I'm into smart guys.
He's nerdy but brawny.
Yes.
Right. He's got it all. He's got it all.
Boy is a personal fave.
So you're not really big on heavy grooming for gentlemen, then?
No, I am.
Okay. So
but like
shave himself down.
You can't like.
He can't. You make accommodations for Beast.
Yeah.
All right. It's funny. When I read that, suddenly my mind for some reason went back to a comic from the 90s where Storm had lost her powers for a while, and so she was,
like in the X-Men 97.
Yeah, she had lost her powers, and she challenges Scott, the Cyclops, for leadership of the team. And so they do it kind of by combat. I mean, not to the death or anything, but they're going to do a combat scenario in the danger room. And she does something so utterly brilliant. I mean, she's still, even though she doesn't have her power, she's very acrobatic and nimble. Yeah. And she manages, her plan is to get his visor off of him. And she knows, because then he can't open his eyes, because his regard for the team, his regard for the danger room, his regard for it, he wouldn't do it. So he says, all right, I yield. And I thought, I mean, what an act of humility. Well, it's very cunning of her. And then he realizes he's beat. And there's this act of sort of abnegation of him. And I thought, I wonder if this is the kind of guy Shenequa wants that would do that. I don't know why I thought that.
I have not given that much thought, but I appreciate you for using your brain cells to think about that. I
will find the issue and I will email it to you. I'll find out what issue it is.
Yes, please. Great issue. Comic book issue? Yes.
Yeah, it's a great issue. So you are an unabashed fan of the Golden Girls, and in the book you say that it's one of the few things in American culture that surpasses race.
Yeah.
And I thought about that because, I mean, it's clearly a show of its time, and it like anything is from its time, right? Everything is embedded in a cultural matrix. You can't get out of that. But I, there's lots of sitcoms, especially Seinfeld, right, has been critiqued, right, for not transcending race enough, right, for people of color only appearing in in subordinate roles and sort of in only like window dressing roles. And Jerry Seinfeld has responded to this and said, it's funny is funny. I don't even think about stuff like that. But how does the Golden Girls transcend race? Because it's a story about white women. I mean that. So tell me what you mean by that, because I found that interesting.
So as you say this, here are my Golden Girls coasters. Right? Let me make sure you see it. Estelle, Dorothy, Rue, and Betty. Betty. So how does this happen? Surpassing race, that might have been too much cholesterol on it. But I will say that
it's bold. It's bold.
It's a bold statement to make. It might have been too much cholesterol. It might have been. But I will say this. When you can get Black people, white people, old, young, tall, short, whomever, to sit down and enjoy 30 minutes of television together, I think you have done a good job. I'm going to say something bold. I don't think Seinfeld is funny. I have tried.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
I have tried and I have tried and I have tried, and I'm just like, waiting for it doesn't happen. Again, this is not an unpopular take. I don't think Friends is great either. I think Frasier is hilarious. I think Frasier is highbrow comedy intellect, right? So it's not just about like whiteness in a sense, because I don't think Frasier surpasses race. I don't know if many people even would agree that the Golden Girls do, but I think that the Golden Girls has a level of authenticity. It's from its time. People generally can understand older age and they're curious about it, whether they're there or not. We all love cheesecake. Each woman in the Golden Girls encompasses a personality aspect of our life. We all wish we were a bit softer and naive, not all of us, but being soft and naive like Rose, and being vivacious like Blanche, and I'm definitely Dorothy. Like, let's get with it. And Estelle, who has no cares in the world because she's going to die next week. She's going to tell you about yourself. And I think all of those things, the theme music, the fact that it's a comfort show, the fact that you can just watch it and not pay attention and know that there's a laugh that's going to happen, I think that very much so resonates with humanity and people. And it just so happens that many of those people are Black.
And is aging funny?
Is aging, like getting older? Is that funny?
Yeah. Is there something about being old? I mean, there's something.
Is aging funny?
Just about like losing your capacities, being candid. I don't know. I wonder if there's something just funny and because all of them are in decline.
I don't. Is aging funny? So yesterday, I don't know what what day was yesterday? Yesterday was Wednesday. Anthony Edwards' grandfather surprised him at the basketball game to see his grandson play. And an interviewer was like, "Hey, how does it feel to, see your grandson play?" And the grandfather was like, "Girl, you can hear? There's just so much going on here." And it was just very much so just old man, I can't hear nothing. I'm going to tell you I can't hear nothing. I'm not putting on no airs for nobody. Like, that's what it was, that clip. And I don't know if aging is funny as much as the gifts that come with aging make us funny. We're honest now. We ain't got time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If it's interesting. If you ask like a 7-year-old or a 77-year-old a question, you're probably going to get the truth, because the 7-year-old hasn't quite. They're just learning, but they don't know quite enough. They're not skilled at the art of manipulation and people pleasing, and the 77-year-old just doesn't care.
It's just like.
But in between those, you're 7 and 77, you're just not getting the truth most of the time.
Right. There's a lot of people pleasing. There's a lot of decorum. There's a lot of, let me just, you're not getting any of that. So like I said, I don't think aging is funny. I think aging is a gift. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. But I think that the honesty that comes with aging makes it funny. can make it funny, because there are some people who are old and dumb as hell, and that's not funny at all.
Well, I mean, stupidity is seldom funny.
It's
I
a
mean,
it's a disease.
but it's so
It's everywhere.
prevalent. It's everywhere. Don't you wish? I mean, this sounds like Stalinist or Nazi Germany. Don't you wish stupid people had to wear signs? Like, let's say the bus comes up and the driver is stupid. He's like, hey, it's 10 minutes. I'll just wait for the next one. That's
Yeah.
okay. Or like, hey, at the coffee shop, I'll just wait for the next. Oh, you're stupid. No problem. I'll wait for Sandra. She's not stupid. It's no problem. No, go ahead.
No, I agree. I do agree.
We're terrible people.
We are. But
Yeah.
it's fine.
It's all right. It's all right.
It's
I mean,
okay.
it's so as I'm reading, I was thinking about a clip from Jerry Seinfeld I just saw, which I thought was hilarious. He was on Jimmy Fallon, and he said, I think when we're dying, when you're dying, you're going out, the last thought is going to be, the coffee here was pretty good. And he said, you know what it is? The cup of coffee is the only thing. Yeah, and it's the only thing in the morning that's and he's sort of, all right, with the coffee. But it's the only thing, he says, that's just on your side. It's before you start your day, before you get into office drama, before you get to the bus, before you get to the person that just doesn't know how to interact at a crosswalk or anything. Before all that, your coffee is with you the way you want it, and it's staring at you saying, Shenequa, let's go. Today is our day.
Mm-hmm.
And then most of life is a disappointment, according to you, sex included.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you say, you take a cup of coffee over sex 95% of the time.
Yeah, so chapter 5, 2 sugars with hazelnut cream, is when I try to showcase the similarities between coffee and sex and the differences between coffee and sex. And you're not the first person to tell me about that clip who has also read my book. I have not had the best experiences with men, and I'm not an anomaly in that, and that's really unfortunate. But I seldom have bad experiences with coffee. And let me tell you how horrible a bad cup of coffee is. It is just, it throws you off. Your day is ruined. That's a nice cup. And it's just like, why? What are we even doing? I get my love of coffee, just coffee, from my mom. She loves coffee and I love coffee. And I like coffee culture and how there's a whole bunch of conversations about having a coffee date on social media, how that's not a real date, how it is a real date, neither here nor there. But how you take your coffee.
That sounds fantastic. You're right there. As a podcaster, I've got my microphone, everything. You're not coffee date on social media. That sounds fantastic.
Some people feel like if a coffee date is like cheap. It's just like, it's a date. You're supposed to go out and get to know the person. Why not? Why just have a cup of coffee?
You know what's great about a coffee date, though? I thought you meant like a virtual coffee date. A coffee date gives you the out. Let's say it's terrible. Let's say it's terrible. I could be the 3-course meal. I'm at the salad course thinking, how am I going to get through this? I'm going to fake choking.
A lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel that way. They feel like, hello, it's just a cup of coffee. I'll drink the coffee, and when it's over, I get to leave.
And you can always get a second cup.
And if it's great, we can
get lunch.
We can get lunch. Like the coffee dates are really what it is. Some people feel like, no, like if we're going to go on the real date, you got to show your effort from the jump. And it's just like, I don't know if it's a matter of effort, but I'm not here to debate coffee date Twitter. But for me, without going too much into detail about the chapter and my sexual preferences, because I do want people to read the book, I have found that...
And just for context, you do tell some more stories, which are awful. And sadly...
Not uncommon.
And not uncommon. And I'd say the majority of women have these stories, right? They're not... I think a lot of men would like to kid ourselves that some of the stories you tell are less frequent than they are more unusual. And most of my female friends, this is the cost of doing business.
Yes.
If you're heterosexual.
Yeah. I've always felt like coffee was there to please me, energize me, and make me feel good. Whereas having sex with men was to please them stroke their ego, and make them feel good. And and this could just be, and I have chosen to remain abstinent until marriage. That is what I'm doing now. But and this could have just been, and I'm referencing the sex that I had prior.
And is that religious at all? Are you is there a religious component?
I am. I do
Okay.
have a strong faith. I do have
All
a
right.
strong faith. But even if I did not have a strong faith, sex is not casual. I don't care what anyone says.
Sure, of course not. Yeah.
Sex is not casual, right? There are too many consequences that come with sex for you to think you can just put on some basketball shorts and that's it. Like, it's not casual whatsoever.
You say something so funny about cottage cheese.
Oh, it's just the worst. Could you imagine? It's just the worst.
Yeah.
We'll let the reader. We'll let the reader.
Yeah, I'll let the reader. Yeah.
Right. But maybe it was the men that I was choosing to date and have sex with, but there were not a lot of men that I had sex with who were genuinely interested in pleasing me or having it just to be a reciprocal energy. You know what I'm saying? That was not the case. I'm smiling. I should not be smiling.
It's funny. I mean, look, funny is funny.
I should not be smiling, but I just did not have good sexual experiences. And I will say it isn't for a lack of me not trying. It just simply just did not happen for me.
I said to a group of friends, I forget the context, but I was just like, you know what? I might never have sex again. Like, what do you mean? I just like, look, getting to know the right person, the effort, the work, the awkwardness, the this, the that. And you have a great section in your book about sex and relationship and how much better. It's not as glamorous.
Yeah.
But you lose the little newness, but what you lack in newness, you get in reliability and emotional support. You get a lot of it over the long term.
It's the Honda Civic.
It's the good daily driver. It's the good daily
Honda
driver.
Civic. It's a reliable car for a reason.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'll ever have sex again. It's possible I won't. But you know what? I was encouraged that I was reading, you know what? Here's an attractive woman. She might never, she's, so
no.
Who knows?
And I'm not doing anything until I am married. And if I don't get married, it's okay.
There you go. These things happen. You say something. So I'm a huge George Michael fan and I'm a huge karaoke guy. So I regularly do George Michael songs for karaoke, but you quote George Michael. I love this, where he says, it's very hard to be proud of your own sexuality when it's not brought you any joy. Mm-hmm. Once it's associated with joy and love, it's easy to be proud of who you are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you talk about, despite distance and identity, you're not gay, you're not famous, you're not a famous musician, I'm
not a part of Wham.
You're not a part of Wham. Just, gosh, in the 80s, some people thought they were straight. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, you could think that in the 80s. You could look at these two nice guys. Women were like, I could date them.
Right.
That's part of the appeal.
He was so beautiful.
Oh my gosh. I do the whole dance like Faith. I love it. It's my staple karaoke song. I love George. But yeah, I like that you get this, the joy. And this is where I think there is something about religious traditionalism that tells us sex is explosive, and it's probably safer in some kind of covenantal, intimate framework where you can play a little bit with safe fences, right? I mean, playgrounds are, it's nice to have fences, and I think committed relationships are guardrails in some sense, right?
Yes. 1000% to what you're saying. But I've also been in committed relationships with people and still not felt safe sexually because I knew emotionally my feelings didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, again, I keep saying this, just like how ubiquitous is we're done with that. I keep saying, I know I'm not an anomaly in this, but I know I'm not an anomaly in this. A woman's sex drive, a woman's desire for sex with you plummets if you don't make her emotionally feel safe. Let me say that one more time. That should be a clip.
Guys, listen up. Guys, listen.
Make sure that's the clip that you post on the socials. I'm very serious. A
I will.
woman's desire to have sex with you plummets if you don't make her emotionally feel safe. If you don't do what you said you are going to do, the do won't happen for you. If you do not value her, the sex won't happen. And I also want to make it very clear, all I got to do is kiss you, rub up on you, and the foreplay. Foreplay starts from the moment you wake up. Bring her a cup of coffee, buy her flowers, check in with her. How you doing? Text, kiss. That's how that happens. Foreplay for us is a 24/7, 365 intentional investment into her. If you are not doing that,
I remember I would regularly send my ex flowers at work, and I found she got validated. Her friends, oh, what's the occasion? What did he do wrong? But people recognize, and so it creates just an act of sending flowers to somebody at work. It creates such a bond.
Or hey, I know you love Wolverine. I saw this comic, this T-shirt, $20 T-shirt. You know, my cousin, she's been with her partner for.
But for you, it would be Cyclops, not Wolverine.
No, it would be Beast. It would be Beast.
Or Beast, right? Beast.
Right.
Beast.
My cousin has been
or Nightwing, or Nightcrawler, rather. Nightcrawler.
My cousin has been with her partner since the year of the flood, Jesus Christ, and they've gone everywhere. They travel. He buys her bags and all that jazz. The one thing that she says she loves the most is that he bought her a $20 Barbie castle set from Toys R Us. She still has it. $20, because that's who she is.
So one of the characters that looms in the book is COVID.
Hey.
Right. I mean, you talk about, the George Floyd murder happened during COVID. Stress levels were up. You know, this is a season where you go viral a bit thanks to Jeff Bezos and some other things, but you talk about the power of being able to be you working remotely.
Yep.
Not just as an introvert, but as a Black woman. Mm-hmm. This was, what was so liberative about your remote reality?
Well, I think that anyone who has to work into an office, you understand that you're there to do the work, and doing the work requires that you get the work done, but you're also working with different people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, experiences, and all that jazz. We all put on a performance when we're in the office, but it's even more difficult for Black people to put on that performance when you see someone who could be your uncle, your brother, your best friend, your father being killed on the street. And I don't think companies understood how big George Floyd was going to be, because in those first few days, those first few weeks, it was business as usual. But then, Darnella Fraser's video came out, and it picked up traction. And I don't want to say that my story, maintaining professionalism in the age of Black death, ... is a lot, was the story. There were many stories that came out. I think what made my story have legs was that it was bolstered by Jeff Bezos at the time. Jeff Bezos has since shown his allegiance to certain political figures, so we are not going to give him too much praise at the present moment. But at the time, for this white billionaire to repost a story written by a little Black girl from Queens about the death of a Black man and how Black women in corporate America, or Black people in corporate America, have to operate, it meant a very big deal. Working from home allowed me the opportunity to turn my screen off, turn my volume down, and cry if I need to. Working from home meant that, the meeting starts at 10. I can get up at 9:30, make my cup of coffee, be in my robe, and have my bonnet on, because I'm not taking my hair out for this 15-minute meeting. Working from home meant that when Sally from accounting sent me that snide email, I can roll my eyes at home and not have to take it in. I think so many of us.
And as a Black woman, right, this is exponentially more liberating, right? Because you
Yeah,
talk early.
not the rolling of the eyes, but
But I mean,
being able to
but you
be.
talk early in the book about black girl math and
Yes,
some of the frustration like that, because black women are held to
we're held to
higher
an
standard as
unjust.
far as, oh my God, you lost your shit. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes, 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 yes.
there's
So you can
perhaps
showcase.
there's more
Yes,
weight off your shoulders as a black woman being
yes,
able to work remotely.
1000%. You can absolutely showcase justifiable anger working from home without it turning into a conversation with HR. 1000%. Yes. Um, and it was just a pleasure and a gift, an unexpected byproduct that came from that moment. George Floyd was murdered.
One of the things you brought it up, so I'll mention something that I noted. I kept a running tab of two things that don't play a prominent role in the book. Donald Trump doesn't play a role in the book,
Hmm.
which is interesting because he's been so dominant on the cultural landscape, right? And since I've been doing this podcast, and since he was elected, and since he was realized, and even in between, even when he wasn't president, he dominated the political landscape, right? I mean, and so I I co-wrote a book about Trump with somebody that just came out. I mean, it's been, I was going to say ubiquitous, and I'm not saying it. I've caught myself, but I did say it. That's not there.
Yeah.
And as a black woman, I mean, black women demographically, it's a stereotype, but it's something that demographically, when I talk to folks that from Pew and PRI who I have on the show and stuff, black women are among the most religious people in the culture, far more than white women, right?
Hmm.
With the exception of maybe white evangelicals, but even white evangelical females, white evangelicals are not going to church in the same way, right? There's this cultural identity marker, but they're not in church as much as black women. So Trump does not play a big role in the book, nor does religion. And now that you say you're religious, that is curious to me. I mean, there's not really much about your own spirituality in the book. Is that intentional? Is it just not something you enjoy writing about, or it just wasn't relevant in the essays you were penning at the time?
So to be very frank, I got my book deal during COVID, right?
Right,
I
right, right.
I got my book deal during COVID, and I got my book deal when he was he on the way out?
He
He was
was, he
on
was, he was
he
on
was
the way
on
out.
the
Yeah.
way out, and Biden was in. So, and it's so funny that you asked that question, because it wasn't a conscious effort to not write about him. It wasn't like, I am not going to censor this white man, and I'm not going to, it wasn't even that. It was, this story was about me and experiences that I had in my late 20s, early 30s. So I really focused on that time period, and I really tried my best, almost forced myself to go back into, like, what was I doing at 23? What was I doing at 25? And at 23 and 25, I just was not concerned with my faith, or was not concerned with God. I was outside in every sense of the word. And the very last chapter of the book, I talk about being inside and the things that I have learned from COVID and so on and so forth. I have recently just gotten to a space where I am more comfortable talking about my faith, and more comfortable about my love of God and reading the Bible, me personally, but I don't force it down people's throats. You know what I'm saying? Because people have had very, very bad, ugly, judgmental experiences with religion. I get it. So I'm not here to tell you going straight to hell, honey. I'm not here to tell you any of those things. That is not my experience. And I don't try to throw it at people. Does that make sense? And I also don't like talking about him, because, like you said, even when he was on his way out, even when he wasn't in the White House, he was still campaigning. Does that make sense? So he was always looming.
He was. I've
He was
never seen someone, yeah, and there was not a
He was
moment he was
always
not
looming. He was
campaigning. Yeah.
always campaigning, even when he was not in the public eye in that way. So it wasn't intentional for me not write about him, but I was focused on getting this book done. That's number one. Number two, this was my first time ever ever having to meet this kind of literary demand. I've never written a book before. I don't have children. This was the biggest test of
It's
endurance.
interesting because you're an accomplished writer that's not been an author, a published author, which is a different thing, right? Because
Yes, it is. Yes, I'm
you've
so
been a
glad you said
successful
that. It's a
writer,
very
very
different
different than writing a book.
writing a story that goes viral, writing an essay, writing a cover story. Those are different things. Writing a book, you will never see me ever give an author anything less than 4 stars. You did it. You wrote it. I don't care if you sold 1 copy. You wrote it. Writing a book is a test of endurance out this behind, Scott. And I, I don't know if you
Now,
want to get another one out of me.
okay, you brought up, speaking of behinds,
So this is chapter 11, BBL.
I was not, I'm reading about your posterior extensively.
So I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that, sir.
That's fine. Look, there's worse things to read about, I'm sure. But you sort of talk about your relationship to your own rear end, and if you were a white woman, you might have sufficient real estate, but like in your family, you're sort of the runt of the litter, so to speak.
Yeah. So growing up, I am a West Indian woman. My entire family, both sides, is born and raised in Jamaica. And I was born here. And everyone in my family, everyone has a nice bum, except me. I'm the tall girl, more athletic, more just lean to a certain degree. One might even think I have a swimmer's body because I have pretty broad shoulders. I just never had that. And growing up in the 90s, where not even the 90s, maybe the early 2000s is when we started to see the influx of behinds and how beautiful they are and all that jazz. It just was never me. Kimberly and Camille.
But I have a friend who's black, and she would say this to me the other day. She's like, you know what? White women's getting asses now. White people are evolving.
Yes. It's just
Right?
like y'all have privilege and ass. Absolutely not.
Exactly. Isn't
Absolutely
that
not.
exactly? Something's got to give.
Something has definitely got to give. And it was just never me. I just never had a butt. Kimberly, as I mentioned in chapter 2, and Camille, she's also mentioned in the book, they always had big behinds. Always beautiful women, shapely women, buxom women. Just was never me. And it was so hard growing up.
Well, you've obviously overcome a lot of challenges, and this is a huge one, or maybe not so huge. I'll tell you one thing that you mentioned: your dad's absence in your life, and just the distance, and I have to tell you, that was the least satisfying essay in the book.
Really?
And I think because I felt the absence.
Oh.
Like the emotional presence. I mean, it was well written, don't get me wrong, but I think it was painful because I felt the absence in the chapter. Like I could tell, not just by what you wrote, but the way it read, that there was real lack there. And I mean, I compliment you on the vulnerability, but I found that I felt a little empty after reading that. I mean, it's not an insult to the writing. Maybe it's transference. I mean, I felt the empty space when I read it.
That chapter, that chapter wasn't challenging for me to write, and chapter 3 wasn't challenging. Redacted about me changing my phone number. Maybe it's a level of acceptance that I've just had. Maybe it's I think it is acceptance, because in the chapter, a friend of mine, Grace, she makes it very clear. She's just like, hey, your father chose not to be in your life. And she said that with the utmost kindness. She didn't say it with any kind of hurt in her voice, maliciousness. There was none of that. And when I finally made peace with the fact that it was a choice to not be in my life, I think that essay was easy for me to write, and it was easy for me to um, write about the absence of him.
Yeah, and maybe I'm not taking away from the chapter, but I felt there was a different emotional tone in that, and it was not as intense. There was more distance from it.
And I think it's just, I think I gave that chapter, I think I gave each chapter what it left me with, right? And in full transparency, my father left me with nothing. I tried my best to articulate that.
Couldn't even spot you for a phone.
No, couldn't spot me for a phone.
Yeah, that was tragic. There's something also you bring up that I found. This is in a chapter called Jagged Little Pill. And you talk about this relationship between Oprah Winfrey and a woman I'd never heard of, Iyanla Vanzant, who was a lawyer who would do these, who would kind of hold court every few episodes and answer legal stuff. She wanted to have her own show. They wind up having a falling out. They reunite years later, and Oprah's very magnanimous. You know, you've already forgiven all this. But then when Van Zant offers a narration of the story that Oprah thinks is inauthentic and not true, she says, it's great. She says, I don't accept that. And you lift that up as, wow, you can do that? Like, wow, yes. This is something that you kind of lift up as a resource and a lesson that you don't have to stipulate to this person to this person's accounting of things. Yeah.
So I remember that episode. I remember that moment. I don't know how old your listeners are, but and I don't know, like you said,
it's cradle to the grave. It's a wide array.
So in New York, right after General Hospital at 3 p.m., 4 p.m., Oprah Winfrey came on. And hearing Oprah Winfrey every day at 4 p.m. when I came home from school, it was just, that's what you heard. You heard the studio audience. And I remember that episode, and I just remember wait, Oprah said, I will not accept that. I just was flabbergasted that if someone was mad at you, that you had to accept whatever treatment they delivered because they were mad at you. And I just was like, wait, you don't that's that's not what you do. I was completely blown away. Now, I might have been maybe 12 or 13 when that episode aired, but it's only now at 39 going into 40 that I'm now employing that no, I will not accept that.
Yeah. How has that been? I mean, can you give an example where you've done that? Because that's really interesting.
Oh, great. No, I will not accept that. I don't know if I've said those words as much as I'll give you an example. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what you asked for, an example. My mom, we live 3 blocks away from each other. Me and my mother are madly in love with each other, but she's ridiculous.
No, that comes through in the book.
Does it come through?
Yeah, that's very different, right? Like the chapter about your dad, there's this sort of wind blowing through it, where it's like a deserted Western town with a tumbleweed. Oh. Your mom, no, it's warm, and I picture her, and I had this image of her in my head looming large from your writing.
Me and mommy are madly in love with each other. She's garlic and I'm rosemary. That's who we are. And she lives 3 blocks away, if that 4. A family friend stayed with her for a few days, and that family friend was not a good house guest, to the point where it felt as though she was wearing out her welcome. I went over to my mother's house to pick up some mail, and I just was like, "Hey, mommy, what's going on?" We're talking. The family friend. It was the night before that they were going to leave. So mommy was like, "Okay, Chin, I'll come walk you home." So she walks me home. Again, we only live 3 or 4 blocks away. And she's telling me about how the family friend is doing this and doing that, and just like no consideration, right? And then she said, "This is why you are the way you are, Chin. You never let people take advantage of you." And when she said that to me, Scott, I felt like I almost started crying, because when you're one of the first in your families to employ the word no, or when you're one of the first in your families to say, "I'm not comfortable with that," baby, baby. What's that gift from Game of Thrones, or is it Lord of the Rings, where the guy has the sword and the army's coming up again? That can be what it feels like, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a Black woman, especially if you come from a Caribbean household. When you say no for the first time, or I am not accepting of that, or it can be like, and for a very long time, I felt like my family just thought I was mean or rigid or rude or just no. Like I had a very good idea of where my fences needed to be. And I needed you to call ahead of time before you wanted to hop over that fence. So
There's
when
a
my
great
mom said that to me, I felt like, oh, y'all get it. Finally.
there's a great line from the Book of Psalms. Now, of course, it was kind of ruined by the book, The Prayer of Jabez, but the psalmist says, "My boundaries have fallen in pleasant places."
Mm,
And that's key, right? I mean, so much of your book is about boundaries, emotional boundaries.
yeah,
And
emotional
a friend of mine, one of my best friends, actually said to me years ago, he said, "The beginning of the spiritual life is learning where you end and the world begins."
mm.
Right? So if your membrane is too permeable, right? If it's too if then it's all infection, right? I mean, it's all.
Ooh, yeah.
I'll tell you, this book, for anybody that's working on boundaries, on emotional resilience, or anyone that just loves the English language, because you are really artful with it. Shaniqua, thank you for writing it. A Black Girl in the Middle,
Oh, thank
essays on
you.
allegedly figuring it all out. Run. Don't walk to your keyboards, my friends, because nobody goes to bookstores anymore, right? But unless you're in New York. But if and there's a copy of it in libraries, because I saw it
Yes.
first. My public library. That's where I saw
Oh,
it
you
first.
got it at your public library.
Well, I saw it there, yeah, and then your publicists were very gracious to send me a copy. But yeah, I was
Excellent.
perusing the nonfiction shelves, and this looked so great. I thought I need to read this book. So
Take
thank
it to
you
the
for
library.
writing the book, and thank you for coming on the show and talking with me about it.
Thank you.